Welcome back to the Mott & Bailey Basement Bar. This is Straight to the Chase. I am your host, Chase Thornton, and today we make a stop at the hot corner. We're talking about the top 12 third basemen you'll need to be keeping your eye on draft day as we get set for the 2025 fantasy baseball season. Thanks for being here, everybody. Last time out, we talked about the other corner infield spot, first base. And like first, third base is typically a position where we expect to be able to find some raw power numbers, right? We're putting together the meat and potatoes of our lineups right here. But at third, more so than at first, you're going to be able to mine some gold in your stolen base categories as well. There's multi-category juice to be had here, and I think across more categories than you typically find at first base here, just based on probably some of the athletes that you see playing the position. Now last year, for me, just kind of the way the draft fell to me in my home league, you guys remember about 5 years ago or so when it seemed like every infielder on the Reds roster was a third baseman, right? It was like when you played old school ice hockey on Nintendo and you could choose the fat, slow guy or the fast, skinny guy or the medium guy. And sometimes you just choose the same guy for all four dudes on your team. You'd end up with four guys who all look like your fat Uncle Tony cosplaying Tron. And so your team was slow as all hell, but like no one could knock you down. So you just charge towards the net, put one in. You guys would celebrate and you'd do it all over again. That was the Reds a couple years ago. Probably about 5 years ago by now. But I mean, they had Eugenio Suarez, they had Kyle Farmer, they had Matt Davidson, they had Mike Moustakas, and they were just kind of like, yeah, let's see how this goes. Throw them all out there, That was kind of my home league team last season. I had Jose Ramirez. I had Alex Bregman. I had Junior Camonero. I had like 2-3 other dudes who all had third base eligibility. And it's kind of just how the draft fell. And I liked the profiles as they came up, and I liked how they fit onto my team. And again, it's a points league. It's not a categories league. But there's a lot of offensive firepower to be had at third. Now, I don't recommend you follow that as a strategy, just, spamming your roster with third baseman. I did end up as the top regular season team, but I got bounced in the first round of the playoffs. And, as for the Reds, I mean, they haven't finished better than third in their division since 2012. So, all fives in your lineup is not the way to go, right? But you do need at least one. And there is some fun to be had here. So without further ado, let's crack one open here and let's get straight to the chase. Now at number 12 is Matt Chapman of the San Francisco Giants. If you guys remember, Matt Chapman was kind of a bit of a thing going into 2023. He was drafted as a top 10 third baseman, but then he really disappointed players with a mediocre season then. So he signed with the Giants, and he almost seemed like an afterthought. He was drafted as the 22nd third baseman off the board, 22nd third baseman off the board in the 22nd round. So dueling 22s there, catch 22 as it were. But he ended up being a huge value and was kind of a down year for the position. And he finished as the number 2 scoring player at third base in points leagues. He was actually useful in categories too. Hey, he set a career high in stolen bases. He had his highest batting average since 2019. He had his most RBIs since 2019. He tied for the second highest home run total of his career. He scored a ton of runs. In fact, he was second among third basemen. So, 98 runs. Whew. Where did that come from? It was just a real nice season for a guy that, you picked up on a flyer to maybe fill your corner infielder slot, or maybe just I got a bench spot open. Why not take Matt Chapman? I picked him up. In fact, I was able to pick him up. I think I actually picked him up as a free agent now that I think about it. I don't think he was a draft pick for me. I think I picked him up as a free agent. But he was able to turn that Giants signing into a nice long-term contract here. And I'm not quite as high on him as they appear to be, but I'm not, I don't know. I'm not convinced we see a full repeat of last season from him. Let's just say that. That 15 steals he had more than doubled his career total in 7 prior seasons. Okay. So is that his new norm, or was that some kind of crazy fluke from the Giants there? And another thing about it is Oracle Park is not particularly power friendly or hitter friendly in general, for that matter. So even though, his StatCast numbers were still pretty strong, right? But 27 home runs, to me, in that park with his profile, that seems kind of more like the upper reaches of where he should be than necessarily like his new norm, right? And he's not a batting average guy. He's not an on-base percentage guy. And I'm not really all that crazy about the dudes hitting behind him. So, I mean, that 98 run total, that looks to be, shall we say, not repeatable as well. I mean, no one knows where it came from. I don't think he ever sniffs that again. But, hey, he did it once, I suppose, if you want to look at the glass 3/4 full. Now, Chapman strikes out a bunch. So that's going to limit his usefulness in points leagues. I've talked about that before, my feelings on guys who strike out a bunch in points leagues. But especially if I'm right about that home run total dropping, that striking out is going to hurt in points leagues. But Matt Chapman is an all-world defender, good athlete, better athlete than I think some of us think after he had that down season. He's going to play every day. He's going to give you middling power and counting stats. But he's going to give you enough that I think he's a starting third baseman again. I think he's top 12, which is why I have him top 12. And he's definitely worth a roster spot. I mean, if nothing else, he's worth a roster spot as your corner infielder. If you think somebody else is more worth it in the top 12, obviously there's guys that are more worth it in the top 12. But if you get to this point in the draft, you don't have a third baseman, you think somebody else is better for you, grab that dude. But hey, Matt Chapman is worth a roster spot as a corner infielder. Remember, it's not just the top 12 third baseman, top 12 first baseman that are going to start in your league. If you've got a corner infield slot, you're looking at another 6, 7 of each of those positions at least, who are starting players in your league. Matt Chapman is a starter in fantasy lineups this year. But for an 11th round pick, he feels more like a fallback option to me this year than somebody that I'm necessarily targeting. Okay, so keep that in mind. But at number 11 is Alec Bohm of the Philadelphia Phillies. It's last year's National League All-Star starter at third base, and he was kind of a frequent subject of trade rumors this offseason, and a lot of them involved my Brewers. I don't have the Brewers jersey anymore. We're wearing the home jersey with the Chasers on it, but I do still have the Barrelman hat there, so we are still rocking the Brewer love, I guess. But in the end, either way, Alec Bohm is going to be back in the city of brotherly love, hitting third or fourth in one of the league's best offensive lineups that there is. They were top 5, like as a team, top 5 in almost every category. Just go to baseballreference.com, look at last season's team batting stats, sort them, and see how often the Philadelphia Phillies pop up in the top 5. And now you're talking about the dude who's going to be like the linchpin of the whole thing at 3 or 4. I kind of like that, right? He was 4th at the position in RBIs last season. He drove in 97 runs for the second straight season. 6th in batting average at 280, which is nice. Now, his run totals weren't all that impressive, right? He only scored 62 runs, but overall, he had a solid season. He finished 8th in points league formats at third base. He was sort of solidly in that third tier of startable players at the position, right? He wasn't spectacular, but right there, like I said, solid starter, a guy who helped you out more often than not. Now, he's done a nice job of improving his plate discipline. He's taken him a lot more pitches here lately. He's improved his chase rate and his strikeout rates over the last 3-4 seasons. If anything, there's even room for improvement in that batting average department. He's hit 274 or better in each of his past 3 seasons. But in each of those seasons, he missed his expected batting average by an average of 11 points. So that tells us, again, there might be something more there. If he hits if he gets that average up to 285 or so, now we're talking about some stuff. If you look at Alec Bohm, he's about 9'3", or at least he feels like it to my 5'5" ass. But he looks and he feels like he should hit more home runs. But he honestly carries a pretty slight launch angle, and he carries this teeny tiny barrel rate, so he doesn't necessarily make as hard a contact as you as you think, and he doesn't drive the ball like you think a guy like him might. All right. Now, it would be just an awesome blossom with extra awesome if he could be a lot closer to 20 home run power like he was 2 years ago. But I don't know. I mean, maybe 15 home runs is just who he is, and we're going to have to live with him getting us, stats and points in other ways, right? The Phillies are an aggressive running team, so I expect him to maintain that kind of 5 steal average there or so. But more importantly, I like the idea that when they're aggressive on the base paths, he should be taking extra bases. And I think that's going to help that run total rebound a little bit there. Now, he's coming off the board in the 12th round. He's one of the last startable third base options. And honestly, if you're waiting that long to fill the position, I think I like him better than Matt Chapman. And Matt Chapman's going a full round and a half earlier. So, Alec Bohm, dude to keep in mind, not going to help you much in your home run category, though. So, keep that in mind as you build your roster. If you think you want to wait and try and snag him, or if you end up with him, you might have to target power specifically later on in the draft. At number 10, Jordan Westburg of the Baltimore Orioles. Young man had a broken hand. It cost him a good chunk of the end of last season there and limited him to only 107 games. Now, when you factor in that it was only his second season, and we really only have just over, like he's played like 175 games or something like that at the pro level. I mean, we really only have just over a full season's worth of games to evaluate him on. Westburg presents one of the bigger guesses in the draft this year. Okay. Before the injury, keep in mind, he was scoring at a top 7 or so pace for fantasy. Again, points leagues. But you can't score fantasy points without doing well in the fantasy categories, right? He was scoring at a top 7 pace before that injury. So he was looking promising there. He carries a launch angle and he carries exit velocities that should play real nicely, especially, keep this in mind as we talk about other positions as well. You got to consider the Orioles, remember, moved their left field fence in at the power alley. And they are also, not only did they move that fence in quite a bit, they also are going to shorten the wall itself from about 13 feet high to under 7 in some places, right? That's my basketball dunking height. Now, his pull numbers versus his straightaway numbers, they look really nice in a way that I think he can exploit those ballpark changes. If you look at his pull numbers, look at his straightaway center numbers, look at his launch angles, look at his StatCast numbers in general. I'm not saying that the Orioles had Westburg's profile in mind when they decided on the changes they were going to make to their ballpark this offseason, but honestly, they really couldn't have done too much more to help him out without giving the farm away to everybody, to be honest with you. I mean, they're going to still start at 333 and it's still going to run immediately back off the foul pole to that 370 something nook. But there's now going to be a spot in the deep power alley between the power alley and center right there where it actually comes into 364. And like I said, with a lower fence, now we're talking. I'm really excited to see what Westburg can do with a full season of health. And also the fact, I mean, like I said, he's going to be batting behind Gunnar Henderson. He's going to be batting in front of probably Adley Rutschman. He's probably going to be batting in front of Colton Cowser. So he's going to have some dudes around him that are going to allow those counting numbers of his to really stack up as long as he's healthy. I like that. Now, it's not hard to envision a season here where he cracks 25, 30 home runs, okay, with the new changes and with his health. The Orioles, I mean, they're not particularly aggressive on the base paths, okay? But Westburg he has the speed to steal more than he's been allowed to so far, let's just say. And with that speed, with Rutschman and Cowser behind him, I feel like his steamer projection is only 65 runs scored this season. I think that's more like his floor than his ceiling. I think that's a lot closer to the bottom of where things are going to be than where he actually ends up or where he could end up. Okay. And he should carry some second base eligibility still. So if you want to draft him there, I'm fine with that idea. He's arguably a little bit more valuable to you as a second baseman. He's going in the 9th round, which is late for a third baseman, but honestly, it's pretty early for a second baseman. So if you snag one of the third base studs in the 3rd or 4th, and you want to kind of circle back around and grab Jordan Westburg, you could really lengthen your lineup with some nice cross-category depth and some positional versatility as well there with him. Like I said, I feel like his projections are somewhat on the low to cautious side. I don't want to throw all my weight behind a small sample size like that, just as a general rule, but Westburg's got enough upside. I might be willing to take, what really feels like a reasonable gamble on him this season. So Jordan Westburg, number 10. Number 9, speaking of gambles, Royce Lewis of my neighboring, because I'm in Northwest Wisconsin, my neighboring Minnesota Twins. So, stop me if you've heard this one, right? But hey, a potentially studly fantasy player for the Minnesota Twins scored at a top 7 or 8 pace at his position last season, but was only able to play 82 games or just over half a season, tanking the expectations for managers who gambled a relatively high 5th round pick on him. Now, when you look at it on a face, that situation seems oddly specific, but the fact that we all have to check our notes to know if I'm talking about Byron Buxton or Carlos Correa or Joe Ryan or Royce Lewis or yada, 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 yada for the Twins, that should underline kind of how frustrating things have been for both Twins fans and fantasy managers alike. And living here in Northwest Wisconsin, we get the local Twin Cities television stations. I can tell you it has been nothing but angst when it comes to baseball season for several years now, much like they tend to, react with the Minnesota Vikings. But I digress. I'm not turning this into a border battle. Royce Lewis, he's put together back-to-back tantalizing performances in seasons that were then truncated by injuries, okay? In 2023, his scoring per game could have put him, honestly, at third base number 1 overall for a full season. If you don't believe me, just go back and check his numbers. Do the math. Divide the points he scored by the games he did play, and then multiply that out by a full season's worth of, be conservative, 150 games. He could have finished as a top overall third baseman last season, but he had about 376 different injuries, so it kept him to just 57 games played in 2023, I should say, in 2023. But last season was actually more of the same. His per game scoring was going to have him up in the top 7 or 8 overall at the position, but he missed all of April, all of May with a quad injury. And then he missed additional time right before the All-Star break with an adductor strain. We've brought that up before for a different episode. An adductor strain is a groin strain, so everybody pause and be thankful that you're not dealing with an adductor strain, hopefully, at this point. But, when Royce Lewis is on the field, he's a slugger with a decent walk rate. He's got a good barrel rate. He's got the ability to hit for average. But therein lies the rub, as I like to say. Can he stay healthy and be on the field for anything resembling a full season? He feels like a guy he feels like he's one of those guys who's more likely to give you like 65 games of a 300 batting average and 30 home run type power than he is to actually give you those 30 home runs and see that come to fruition, right? Because he's never going to be on the field long enough for that. That's frustrating. So frustrating. He's got all the ability to be a legitimate 4 or 5 category player, all the ability to be a top 5 position player at his position in scoring. But that health's a worry, dude. Whew. That said, I'm willing to bet that we do see him for over 100 games at least played this season. But that's still not enough to get me real excited about taking him in the 10th round where he's going. If you're going to wait that long to fill your third base slot, we've talked about, waiting a little bit before. You have to gauge whether you've constructed and then can continue to construct a roster that can absorb that seemingly inevitable missed time for him, or whether you're going to be safer with another option like Chapman or Bohm, who's still on the board at that point and should play like 150 plus games. You got to make that gamble. Now, typically you got to take some risks to build a championship caliber team, right? If you play everything safe, you're going to end up safely in the middle. You got to take a couple of risks. You see the type of risk you want to take or not? that's up to you, but he's my number 9 player at the position going into 2025. At number 8 is Alex Bregman of the Boston Red Sox. And we finally have an Alex Bregman signing as of this past week. And then it turns out to be with a team that already has a stud third baseman. Right? At least, if they have a stud bat who is currently playing third base. Well, we should say that. Rafael, Devers, he says he's not giving up the bag. He was promised at third in Boston. So it looks like Bregman may end up more at second and DH for the Red Sox, at least initially. But he is going to maintain third base eligibility, and he is going to step into a lineup here now where he gets to possibly protect Rafael Devers or Jarren Duran, and he's going to set the table for Tristan Casas. That's not a bad gig, dude. Not a bad gig, professionally, not a bad gig fantasy-wise to have him on your team. He finished 7th in scoring last season at third base. Bregman did in points formats, and it was actually a down year for him. His RBI totals, his run totals, both took major steps back. He hit well below his career batting average for the 5th straight season, we might add. His strikeout rate climbed for the 2nd straight season. His walk rate plummeted almost 6 points year over year to a career worst and very teeny 6.9%. And while he's never been exactly like lucky, say, on balls in play, that last season's BABIP of 264 just it kind of feels a little off, right? You put all that together, and it led to the worst on-base percentage of his career in a full season, a full 37 points lower than his previous career low was. Ouch. Now, that said, his StatCast numbers don't necessarily show any significant decline. I mean, he's never had a particularly spectacular barrel rate in his career, but he still hits with a high launch angle. He still hits with decent exit velocity. And I think those are going to play pretty well with the Green Monster there at his new home. Okay, he's only 30. He's not really a particular injury concern. And he's going to be surrounded by some nice offensive firepower. I already mentioned it, but he's going to be surrounded by some nice weapons in that Red Sox lineup, right? So his opportunities for runs and RBIs are going to be there, especially given the rebound that I think we're going to see from his batting average and his on-baseman numbers, okay? So that should put him middle of the pack in just about every category. I'm not really considering any stolen base contributions from him. I'm just, okay, if I don't mention stolen bases as an area where the dude's going to help you, you can kind of guess that he's not going to help you. But signing that contract, hey, did affect his ADP. It's already risen to 94 after he was well below 100. He was being taken after pick 100 earlier this offseason. He's already up to 94 now since he signed that contract. I'm not necessarily sure how much more that's going to rise, but either way, it might be a little rich for me to have too much exposure to him. Okay. When we look at ADPs right now, there is a clear drafting tier gap this season at third base, right? And Alex Bregman is leading off the lower edge of that gap. The top 6 guys with third base eligibility they're all gone, okay, by the end of the 4th round. Bregman's ADP of 94, that puts him towards the end of the 8th round. So almost a 4-round difference there in 12-man leagues. And that's how I delineate round sizes, by the way. I just kind of assume that 12-man is kind of the standard league size. Some people think of it as 10. I tend to think of it as 12 because I think it's a happy medium between the 10s and the 16s that we see. But that's how, when I say a round, I'm talking multiples of 12 here. But that's a significant and a telling gap of 4 rounds between the last of who people see as the stud tier and then Bregman. I'd rather be in on the big guns, but I also think that you're still going to be able to put an effective lineup together if you end up with Bregman as your third base, or even as your corner infielder. If you do grab one of those guys, and again, like I said, circle back around, grab him as a corner infielder because it's a starting position on your lineup, go for it. That would be awesome if you can swing it, but you're going to take a hit somewhere else if you double up on that third base position. Number 7 on the list here, Junior Camonero from division rival Tampa Bay Rays there. We're finally going to get to see the former top prospect in a full season. And hey, the hype is real. If you've been paying attention, people are hopped up to finally see Junior Camonero break camp with the team and play all season. We've really, only had a few glimpses of him in the majors so far, but the results should be encouraging if you look into the numbers, okay? He's got legitimate power, as evidenced by his exit velocities, his hard hit rates, they're lights out across the board. And actually, even though, again, it's just limited sample size and we've only seen him for a couple of short stints here, but his barrel rates in his limited stints in the majors are actually better than his recent time in AAA. So he's actually squared the ball up better against major league pitching than he was in the minors. Now he's going to strike out a bit, which again, not ideal. I don't like that, but it is what it is as well. His numbers in pro ball across levels though look to be manageable. He's not like a strikeout king or anything. And especially if he can hit for that 30+ home run power we all expect from him, I'll take what looks to be maybe a 20% strikeout rate right now from him. You'd like to see him increase his launch angle with all of that power. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to beat the dead horse with the Rays playing at Steinbrenner Field this season. If he could pull the ball a little bit more with some air under it, that could really lead to an explosion in power numbers right here off the bat in his first full season. Now, obviously, it's a lot of prognosticating off of a small sample size with him. And we've got small sample size in the majors. We've got this meteoric rise through the minors, right? But the underlying talent is there. And now, so too is the opportunity there. Okay. Camonero's going to cost you a mid-9th round pick, and he's coming off the board with an ADP right at 100, like literally right at 100. And that's a gamble. It's a gamble taking him there, given all the unknowns, but it's one that could pay off big time with 4 category impact. Yeah, 3 for sure, maybe even 4 categories. Now, you might want to hedge your bets a bit with the rest of the roster if you do take him as your third baseman, but he should be fun to watch in 2025. Now, when I say hedge your bets, again, I'm not saying take him in the 9th and then say, geez, I better protect myself at third base if Junior Camonero comes out and sucks, and then jump right around in the 10th round or whatever and grab Chapman. Don't do something like that. No. What I'm saying is pay attention to how your roster is built and where your roster is vulnerable if Camonero does not hit big and hit the absolute ceiling right off the bat. I don't necessarily expect him to hit that right off the bat. I expect him to be a good and a startable player at this position. I've got him ranked 7th overall. And I think he's got the potential, and I think that the opportunity is there. And I like that. Where he's going in drafts, again, I'm not necessarily sure I'll have a ton of him. But when I say to hedge your bets with the rest of the roster, what I'm saying is you need to tell yourself, if he doesn't hit on everything across the board, where is my lineup then lacking? And draft later on in the positions that you still have to fill in order to cover up for that and take care of that. You don't draft another guy at his same position right away like you're going to fail. Don't draft like you failed. Draft like you succeeded. But be smart about your roster construction as well if the Camonero numbers don't come through. Now, once again, we've reached the halfway mark in our countdown. So first off, again, a toast to all of you watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast there. Slanjava, everybody. I want to remind you to, again, hit like, hit subscribe, make sure you're getting notifications whenever we drop new content here so we can continue to get you ready for fantasy baseball season and so you can chase greatness all season long and dominate your league mates. You can find past episodes of Straight to the Chase wherever you get your podcasts. So be sure to download us here on your favorite podcast app. And if you got something to say to me, fine. Hit me up on the comments here on the YouTube, or even better, get over to fantasybaseballadvice.com. You're going to find all my baseball content over there, podcasts, articles, all of it. Sign yourself up for a membership. You're going to have access to our fantasy sports only social media platform where you can friend me And you can ask me and others questions on fantasy baseball, fantasy football, NBA fantasy, WNBA fantasy. If you're talking to me, if you like, you can curate your feed. You only have to follow the sports you care about, but you're going to be able to interact with other fantasy sports enthusiasts and other fantasy content creators. You can download the app. You can always be connected on the go. Again, that is fantasybaseballadvice.com, just like it says right there, passing underneath me right now in the ticker. So we've reached the top half, and at number 6, another guy with a small sample size in the majors and a lot of buzz, but question marks abounding for number 6 guy on our countdown, Mark Vientos of the New York Mets. Now, 2024, Vientos didn't get the starting gig there at third in New York until partway through last season, but he kind of grabbed it by the throat once they handed it to him, and he didn't let go. Remember, they've got, Brett Beatty was supposed to be a prospect. He was kind of the prospect the year before that everybody was all hopped up about. But Vientos hit 27 home runs. He had 71 RBIs in just 112 games. Okay. You extrapolate that out a little bit, which is dangerous to do, but also is just a mathematically thing that we can do it's one of the tools we have available to us. So we got to use it. Now, that kind of production, but again, if you extrapolate it out over a full season's worth of starts, 150 or so games, that's going to threaten 35 to 40 home runs, and that's going to threaten about 100 RBIs. That's not bad. But therein lies the rub, chasers, as we say. Vientos, he's another guy with just this really small sample size to judge off of. And in that small sample size, there were some red flags potentially last season, okay? First among the questions is if he is really going to hang on to that full-time third base job or not. He's not a great defensive player. And, if he doesn't hang on to it, if they do decide to give the job back to Beatty, or if they do decide to give the job to top prospect Luis Angel Acuna, do the Mets then choose to supplant the Jesse Winker Starling Marte platoon at DH so they can keep Vientos' power bat in the lineup? If they determine that they can't stomach his defense anymore, do they try to still find a place for that bat in his lineup? Remember too that Vientos was set to move on to first base this offseason until Pete Alonso and the Mets front office finally relented and admitted they weren't ready to see other people yet. But now, his bat is going to have to continue to outplay his glove to stay on the field, because they re-signed Jesse Winker and brought him back. And like I said, they have Starling Marte playing on the other side of that platoon. So he's going to have to continue to swing in order to stay, relevant and stay on the field here. And as I said, there are concerns with his profile when he does swing. When he swings hard. Okay. And when he makes contact, the ball disappears, and it disappears in a hurry. He carried a 14.1% barrel rate last season, and he's got a career hard hit rate of 48%. That's the positive. Those are the things we like. Those are the things we hope to continue to see play up with him. But unfortunately, when he makes contact is a big qualifier in Vientos' case, okay? For his career, again, small sample size, but we have what we have. For his career, he swings at pitches out of the zone almost a third of the time. That is a problem. And that is a problem, especially when opponents are only throwing you a fastball about once every 5 pitches. Opponents have thrown him fastballs increasingly fewer and fewer and fewer, or a lower percentage of the time in all 3 of his seasons that he's played pro ball here. So that contributes to Vientos having a career K rate of almost 30% himself. You've heard my opinion on dudes who strike out too much, okay? But you couple that with the fact that he's got a walk rate below 7% for his career. Mark Vientos, he's doing his damnedest here to turn the 3 true outcomes. If you've heard of the 3 true outcomes of hitting, he's really working hard to turn that into just 2 true outcomes, really. He wants to be strikeout or pop that mofo over the fence. Now, can you succeed long-term with that type of profile? And more importantly, for us, for our conversation, can you produce meaningful fantasy points with that kind of a profile? I'm going to say, I mean, hey, it's not easy, but it is possible. Okay. Teoscar Hernandez would like to say hola, or his 2024 season would like to say hola, at least, right? Teoscar Hernandez is a dude who, carries this kind of a profile, swings and misses a lot, and, hits for a lot of power, not necessarily going to be great in the average category. But listen, 2024 was Hernandez's 9th season, not his 3rd. And it certainly was not his first time, his first season as a full-time starter out of the gate like it was for Vientos. So it is a legitimate question, okay, if Mark Vientos is going to be able to hold up, or if he's going to screw himself into the ground and screw himself out of our lineups, swinging and missing so much. But he's hitting in what looks to be a really nice lineup again after the addition and then the re-addition of Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. And right now he's being drafted as pick 105 in the 9th round. He's right around Westburg and he's right around Junior Camonero, and he's just before Lewis and Chapman. Okay. There are questions all over this tier. You've already heard me talk about these guys. There are questions all over the place. If you want safety at this tier, you're probably going with Bregman in the 8th. If you want upside with a reasonable floor expectation, you're probably going Westburg. Okay. Vientos, if he's the guy you end up with this tier, he's got the power goods to really make it fun. He's going to have you either popping your top in frustration, or in celebration, I should say, or blowing your top in frustration. Okay. You're either going to be cheering your head off or screaming your head off at your screen. Either way, draft accordingly. Okay. So now we've reached the stud tier of third baseman, and we are going to kick it off with last season's number 3 scoring third baseman in points leagues, Manny Machado of the San Diego Padres. Now, we didn't get 2022 Manny last season, but it was kind of quietly one of his better fantasy seasons all around. It was one of his best seasons, really. He tied for 3rd in home runs. He was 8th in runs. He was 2nd in RBIs, and he finished 3rd in batting average among qualified third basemen. So, I mean, he really, at the position, he really carried himself. And, he even pitched in double-digit steals for just the 4th time in his career. I mean, they turned him loose. Man, he got to run. Now, he's 32 now, but he's still swinging a good bat. If you look at it, dude, I mean, his exit velocities last season, 2nd highest of his career. He had his 3rd best hard hit rate ever. He still doesn't walk much, but he still doesn't strike out at an unmanageable rate either, right? So he's still swinging a good bat. But it kind of feels like drafters are just getting kind of like Manny fatigue, right? They're bored with the name and they're ready to move on to shiny new toys elsewhere, younger guys. And I think that's a mistake that we can take advantage of, okay? In a full healthy season, Manny Machado has never ranked outside the top 10 scorers at his position, including 2018, his lone year with the Dodgers, and his lone year as primarily a shortstop when he ranked as shortstop number 3. I just told you, he's still swinging a great bat. He's still seeing the ball as well as he ever has, okay? But he's being drafted in the 3rd round right now at about pick 33. And in some drafts, they're seeing him fall even a little farther than that. If he's still there when your late 3rd or early 4th round pick comes up, grab him and do not let go. Okay? You're going to take him and no one's going to groan because you got their guy, but you are going to be getting a guy. And later on, then you can tell everybody that he was your guy when he rewards you with another top 5 fantasy finish and wreaks havoc across the board there. You're not going to be disappointed if you take Manny Machado where he's going. Trust me on that one. So then at number 4 on the countdown here is Jazz Chisholm Jr. of the New York Yankees. Now, Jazz was the number 4 scoring third baseman in points leagues last year. And he was primarily the number 4 scoring third baseman for 2 reasons, okay? 1, he got to play for the Yankees, which helps just about everybody. And 2, he finally stayed healthy for a full season. And that second point is really the key. The other one helps, but the second one there is really the key. Playing for the Yankees doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. But Chisholm's a guy that he has tantalized fantasy managers and baseball nerd types for quite a while now, because he does possess that gifted raw talent in terms of his power speed combination and what he can do on a ball diamond. He was top 10 at the position in home runs, in runs, and RBIs. And oh yeah, if you go back and look, he stole 40 bases too. And that was good for 6th in all of baseball. Okay. So he's got the talent there. Now he's going to be moving to second base for New York, it looks like, but he's going to retain multi-positional eligibility at third and likely going to retain some eligibility at in the outfield as well. Now, I didn't include him in my second base ranks. If you go back and listen to that episode there, because he needs to play there for a while to gain eligibility there in a lot of formats. They don't just because a team calls him a second baseman, they don't necessarily throw him out there as such in every, on every platform. But, he's valuable as a third baseman. I've got him ranked 4th for crying out loud, but he's probably more valuable at second. Okay. You likely can't draft him there in your league if you want to draft him and have him play him at second. So you're going to need a plan until he's eligible if you do want to use him there. But the question really with him is just all about that health. Are we going to see him play another 145 plus games? If so, he could threaten 30 plus home runs again. He could approach 100 runs scored. He could have another 40 steals. He could have 80 plus RBIs, especially with that lineup around him. He's another guy that does strike out quite a bit more than optimal. And, it's been over 27% of the time for his career. So over 1 out of every 4 at bats, he's going to strike out once a day for you or so. But the steals that he gets kind of help offset that. Kind of a rare opportunity or rare circumstance, I should say there, where it makes me like him a little more. Makes me like him a little more in category and roto versus points leagues. Because you're not getting the full benefit of that speed if the strikeouts are taking points away. But it's one of those where he still is valuable in points leagues because those steals help make up for some of those strikeouts. And not everybody has that ace in the hole, right? You're going to have to draft him in the stud third base cluster, though, that's in there in round 3 and 4. And that might scare some people away given that injury history. But if his health holds, you are going to be really happy with that production, and you're going to be really happy with the roster flexibility that he's going to afford you. Remember, he'll have outfield eligibility, most likely third base and second base at some point this season. So if that injury history holds up, let's go. If not, then, hey, you took a shot. We talked about it before. You got to take a shot or two to build a championship roster. But if his health doesn't hold up, let's hope you find this year's version of 2024 Matt Chapman there to bail you out, right? But now, number 3, we're talking Austin Riley of the Atlanta Braves. And I have in my notes here written, ouch, ouch, ouch. And that is about all that you can say when you're looking at Austin Riley's 2024 season. Riley was drafted in the 2nd round as the number 2 third baseman overall, and hopes were really high for him last season. He's coming off 3 straight 30-plus home run seasons. He was coming off a 2023 season that finally saw him leapfrog ahead of Jose Ramirez for the top spot in points leagues. But then he had an early oblique injury, and that cost him some time. And then later on in the season, he had a season-ending fractured hand, and that kept him from really realizing his full potential last season and returning that value on the investment that we had put into him. And Riley has legitimate juice in every category except steals. Again, not a shocker. But he's got 35, 40 home run power. He's got 100 RBI potential, especially if that Braves lineup can stay healthy. And we've already seen him score 90 and even well over 100 runs in a season. Now you add that to a potential 280 batting average, and that is a real solid foundational piece for your fantasy lineup. And you're not even necessarily drafting his ceiling because we've seen him put those seasons up, like I said, over the last several years, not last year notwithstanding. Now, he strikes out at a pretty good clip, but again, he's one of those hitters who kind of makes up for it in other ways enough that it doesn't necessarily hurt you in points formats. As evidenced, again, I'll bring it up. His ascension from third to second to the top spot in scoring over the 3 years prior to last season's lost 2024. So yes, he strikes out, and I don't like that. And if he could tame that even a little bit, his value would go through the roof. But he has still already been third, second, and first overall in scoring at the position. So he's not hurting you in points leagues, even with the strikeout numbers. And part of that reason why is his StatCast numbers are elite. Dig into it. Dude swings hard. To call it making contact doesn't really seem to be an appropriate way to describe what happens when Austin Riley's bat interacts with a baseball in time and space. I'm being honest here. It sounds almost passive, and there is nothing passive about a guy with a 91.7 mile per hour average exit velocity, a 14.9% barrel rate, and a 53.4% hard hit rate. Okay. When he hits the ball, it goes, it disappears. Interestingly, I feel like I might be a little low on him even in my ranking here, because I feel like the projection numbers I'm using may be shortchanging him ever so slightly, but there's only 2 more spots ahead of him. I mean, how high can you rank a dude before there's nowhere else to rank him? But that makes him a potentially very nice value in drafts, because he is going at the 3-4 turn in drafts after Jazz Chisholm and after Manny Machado, whom I think he outplays this season. He's kind of the last of the stud tier to go in the drafts. And then there's that 4-round void until Bregman appears in round 8. If you come away with a guy whose average finish in healthy years at third base is number 2 at the position, woo, I would be thrilled if I have to settle for that in my drafts. So keep that in mind when he comes around. If he comes around and you're on the clock there in that 3rd round, 4th round, ooh, yeah, Austin Riley could be a big help for your lineup here. And now at number 2, we took the projections, we let the numbers run around on the table, and this is what they came up with. It is Rafael Devers, the aforementioned Rafael Devers of the Boston Red Sox, at number 2 on our countdown. But it makes sense. It's not out of left field, okay? Devers has been a top 5 points league option for the past 6 seasons. And last season, he could have finished far and away the number 2 scoring option at third base, except that injuries ended up costing him 19 games, so he didn't get an opportunity to play that far. Now, admittedly, the situation here in Boston has become a bit murkier since, our number 8 ranked third baseman signed with Devers' team. But, when I look at that situation, honestly, Bregman is so far above Devers as a defender. I just don't see how this situation doesn't resolve itself with Devers moving to DH more often. I mean, that's just from a purely baseball quality standpoint. And the Red Sox, I think they're going to have to find a way to get Devers on board with that line of thinking if they're going to make a serious run at the AL East this season. But positional drama aside, Devers is another potential 4-category weapon at third base here. He was top 5 at the position in runs, top 5 in home runs, top 5 at the position in RBIs. He was 12th in batting average, so still, a third base 1 option there. And now, with that lineup that I've mentioned before, looking even more stacked when it's healthy, he could push for 35 home runs, 100 runs, 100 RBIs. He could be putting all that together with a possible 270 batting average. That looks really nice for your early 3rd round pick, which is where he's going. Now, the questions, of course, are whether or not the shoulder issue is still an issue, or is it that like a chronic thing? And then 2, can Devers keep his head on straight with all the recent Bregman positional drama? And I don't say that to be flippant, and I don't say that to be dismissive of whatever his worries might be, right? Baseball's a cerebral game as much as it is physical. Check out Chuck Knobloch for a blast from the past if you want to see how much a guy's head can affect his game. But it's got to mess with your head a little bit when a team that you claim has promised you the position goes out and signs a superstar, not just a dude, a superstar at that same position. Regardless of whether you end up displaced or not, that's got to do something, to you upstairs a little bit. Guys at this level have big egos, and they deserve to. And then furthermore, even if he willingly accepts a move to DH, or even just to DH more often than he does now, how is that transition from being active all game to only stepping out of the dugout for your 4 or 5 plate appearances? How's that going to affect him? Right. Now I'm willing to put up with those worries unless there's some drastic days of our lives coming on over the next month or so, because that lineup is going to rake. A rising tide floats all boats, and there is not a whole lot higher that Rafael Devers can rise without taking right off. So I am willing to take that risk. Rafael Devers, my number 2 option here at third base. But then at number 1 overall, here he is, our 5-category juggernaut, Jose Ramirez of the Cleveland Guardians. Jose Ramirez might be the clearest top overall option at his position in fantasy. Although William Contreras and Bobby Witt Jr., spoiler alert, they might like to have a word in that conversation, but Jose Ramirez has not finished lower than 2nd in positional scoring in a full healthy season since his first year as a full-time starter in 2016. And he was 11th that year. First year as a full-time starter, 11th at the position. Since then, top 2 every single year, if he's been healthy and played a full season. In 2018, again, kind of like we talked about earlier with Manny, he qualified as a top scoring second baseman because he switched positions for that 1 year. And he was the top scoring guy at that position. 2019, he only played in 129 games after he broke his hand. He still finished 13th among third basemen. And that is the only time since that first year as a full-time scorer that he's finished outside the top 2. He has been the top scoring third baseman every season, in fact, except for 2023, when, as I mentioned before, Austin Riley finally nudged him out for 1 year. Last season, he set his career high in home runs. He set a career mark in steals. He had his 2nd most RBIs. Look at his StatCast numbers, and they have remained remarkably consistent. And last year, even as he gets older here and is now going to be 32, I think, this season, his StatCast numbers were even better than his career averages last season. So he is not slowing down. Now, he did swing at pitches out of the zone a little bit more than he ever had before. His K rate, however, remained at a very manageable and very nice to see 12%. There's just nothing here that's going to suggest that Ramirez is in decline or in any danger of falling off his perch atop the position, okay? He's going 5th overall in the first round, but honestly, I will tell you, if he is still there when it's your turn at 3 or 4, I say jump on him. He's a possible 40-40 guy. He can score 100 runs. He could drive in 100 as well. Oh, yeah. He hit 280 too. 280 as well, so that I don't get called out for, an inaccurate stat there. But none of those numbers would necessarily be a shock if he hits any or all of them. He is the top dog at third base, given the respect he deserves. Outside of Shohei and outside of maybe Bobby Witt, there is not a better 5-category hitter in the entire game than Jose Ramirez. He is your number 1 third base option. And that is it. That's the top of the mountain for third baseman for fantasy drafts in 2025. I want to thank you again for giving us your time. And again, please like, subscribe, comment, share, do all of the interacting that you do with people online, but do that with us, please. And please go to podchaser.com, search for Straight to the Chase, and leave us a 5-star review. Follow Fantasy Baseball Advice Network on the Twitter X machine. You can follow me personally everywhere, including Twitter at STTChaseFFB. Now, I am off to Disneyland, legitimately. That's not a joke or anything. I'm legitimately headed to Disneyland. Dr. Mrs. Thornton has had that all lined up for a while. So we are bailing. We're going to grab the littles and head out of here and get on the road right after I get off the air here, actually. But we will be back shortly. And next time out, we're going to talk shortstop. But until then, good luck to you all, and we are going to get up, and get out of here. Gone.
We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today.